getting back to what I was going to say, it was an issue in that my husband had. He had some strong opinions on this about interracial marriage, and so he brought the issue to our pastor, his concerns to the pastor about that, and we didn't know that our pastor felt like he felt about interracial marriages. And, he was totally against it. So we, and that was a huge blow up. And there were many smaller ones along the way. One question my husband had for the pastor is why we don't see any people of color in positions in the church. And, you know, some answer was given that kind of pacified us for a few moments, but it was like, if you have a hint of color in you, that's the way we interpret it. If you have a hint of color in you, you knew that you were only going to go. So you're not going to have a position in the church. You're not going to be able to do major things in the church, or have a black person come in and speak. And if you did have one to come in and speak, it was like they had sold their soul to the fundamentalist movement, and it wasn't a good thing. It just wasn't a good thing. But anyways, the issue with the interracial marriage, we had several conversations with the pastor over that, and he just said he couldn't support it. He mentioned a couple of Bible verses. I think one comes to mind about Moses, his wife.
Moses. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, Moses and his wife, and anyway, and he wouldn't budge. Pastor would not budge on it, and so at that time, my husband just said, "Well, we can't be a part of this church. If you feel this way, you need to let the congregation know how you feel about it." And but to our knowledge, wow, that never happened. And we ended up leaving Maranatha. And that was very, very difficult. That was very, very difficult. And fast forward to this day with me, it's hard.
Before you go, because we want to save that for later, Mom, going to refill now.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so when did you leave did you leave Maranatha? When did that happen? What year was that?
Oh my God.
Because I'm trying to think. You guys were at Maranatha, I'm pretty sure, till I got out of college, and that was in 2005. Or have you moved to Maryland by then? When did you move to Maryland?
I moved to Maryland in 2000. Oh my God, I'm so horrible with dates.
Yeah, that's rough. Yeah, so it was probably 2008 or 9.
I think I moved to Maryland in 2009.
Okay, yeah, that sounds right. So yeah. But when did you leave Maranatha? So I was like, after Maranatha, where'd you guys go to church after Maranatha?
We ended up going to Tabernacle.
Oh, you went back to I don't think I knew that.
Oh, wow.
We ended up going to Tabernacle.
That seems like a distinction without a difference in a lot of
we went to another fundamental.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I was to say.
Yeah.
Did Tabernacle did they have a different position on it, or was it just you guys?
I think at this point we were just kind of like, okay, we're gonna let that go.
Mm-hmm.
And Tabernacle, it was a Christian environment, because we still wanted to have the Christian environment. Right. Essence ended up going to school there, playing on the volleyball team. And
I think that was the story that I always tell you, TJ, with me and Essence sitting in our car listening to Sierra. I think that she was playing at shout out Jessica.
Wow.
Anyway, she was playing at Tabernacle, and we were playing at Maranatha. And you saying that just now, I think unlocked the memory. But we were so jazzed to see. I was so happy to see her. We were hanging out in the parking lot together.
Yeah.
So anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Good times.
So we were there for a couple of years,
Mhm.
and it was the same, but I think we just kind of went with it.
Yeah.
We just kind of went with it, and I don't know, just
Huh.
Yeah.
So when you went to Maryland, did you guys attend another independent Baptist church?
no.
Okay, so it was Tabernacle was the last
That was
part
it.
then.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I remember all of this, the dust ups with the racial issues and everything. I don't remember how the interracial marriage one came up, but I do remember there were no black deacons and stuff like that. And I remember me and Dad and I think Mark, we were talking to Pastor Carnahan about it.
Mhm.
And one thing Dad brought up, I don't know if I mentioned this on the show before, Kayla, but so Martin Luther King Day, it has been a roller coaster ride watching your mom already know watching how conservative Christians have treated Martin Luther King since I've been alive, and when I was a kid, we were at Tabernacle. And in fact, this is why we left Tabernacle. I'm pretty sure one of the reasons that at Tabernacle, which makes it so funny you went back. I didn't know that, but it's just very funny. But so we went to the Christian school at Tabernacle Baptist Church in Lebanon, Missouri.
Yeah.
And a lot of these Christian churches did not celebrate Martin Luther King Day. There's like, no, we're not doing that.
Yeah.
And Tabernacle was one of them.
Mhm.
And I remember you guys said you are not going to school at Martin Luther King Day. You guys said, no, you're staying home. I remember that. You guys had to stay home.
Yeah.
And that's I think we went back to Maranatha after that.
Yeah.
And so I remember Dad asking Pastor Carnahan about the fact that, you bring up a lot of historical figures during your sermons, and you do it all the time. I've never once heard you bring up Martin Luther King. You don't even bring him up during Martin Luther King weekend. It's always on a Monday. We've been here several Sundays before Martin Luther King Day. You've never brought it up. And I was there for this. I remember Pastor Carnahan saying, well, I don't bring up Martin Luther King because he was an apostate. And now, for those of you wondering what he meant by that, if you look at the writings of Martin Luther King did not believe in the virgin birth, and he didn't believe in the deity of Christ. And that was against our doctrinal stances. And so he says, so I don't feel comfortable bringing him up, in a church setting. And I said, well, I've heard you bring up Thomas Jefferson before, and Thomas Jefferson didn't believe any of those things either. In fact, you can find a copy of the Jefferson Bible, and the Jefferson Bible is the New Testament in which all of the supernatural stuff is taken out. It's just like the philosophical words of Jesus. And it's like, and I said, how come you don't have a problem bringing up Thomas Jefferson, but you have this problem with Martin Luther King? And he said, well, Thomas Jefferson wasn't an ordained minister, so it's perfectly fine. I know, I had the same face, Mom. I had the exact same face.
What?
Like, oh boy. Well, I know, right? It was the weakest answer ever. Well, it was
Just
the weakest
like
answer.
mental gymnastics to justify.
Yeah, right.
Things.
Yeah. And the movement was already on thin ice with the Martin Luther King thing for me already. I was like, okay, I see what's happening here.
Yeah.
I have to correct myself. I said that was the weakest answer ever. Mom, you brought up a weaker one. I didn't know about this, but you asked him about the interracial marriage thing, and he brought up Moses and Zipporah. So for those of you who don't know this, in the book of Exodus, Moses married a Midianite, I believe, and her name was Zipporah. And he had an interracial marriage or whatever. And it's like, well, I guess they fought a couple of times, but like, if that was it? I mean, what married couple doesn't fight? Theirs just happened to be recorded, and that was a weird one. I thought he would say something about God has made the nations of the world of one blood and set their bounds. That's what I usually hear when people talk about it. But I mean, even looking at it as if I were still a Christian, the arguments are really bad. They're really bad. It's just,
I agree.
They're just based on bigotry and everything. And I wanted to bring up two things you mentioned too, Mom, about, first off, well, I guess they're both the same thing. I agree with you 1,000,000% that the Christian movement could be so much more. It could be so much better than, there are a lot better versions of Christianity than the ones that we went through. Right. But the fact that I have a lot of issues with a lot of stuff about Christianity, even Jesus, honestly, but the core message of loving your neighbor and being kind and turning the other cheek. There's a lot of good you could on the foundations of the early church and sharing resources, dunking on rich people at every opportunity, bringing people together. It could be great. And to see it devolve into, let's face it, a movement it's not based on love, it's based on hate. It's based on hate of foreigners. hate of fear, hate of taxes, hate of education, hate of gay people. Let's be real, hate of black people. I mean, that's what that is the core of the entire movement. And one way you can tell this is the fact that 3 elections in a row, over 80% of them voted for Donald Trump. Like that has nothing to do with religion at all. It's just about, these cultural bigotry and biases that are involved there. And I wrote down Jesus can accept you where you are. That's something you didn't see a whole lot of. You saw it sometimes, but suspiciously. And I didn't think about this until I think Kayla or Kai brought it up. They said that a lot of times, like these 27-year-old dudes just show up out of nowhere, like these itinerants and ne'er-do-wells. And I was like, you're right. I remember that happening a lot, where like these like single guys with like questionable backgrounds, like, well, they're part of the church now. They're gonna be working here. I was like, oh, that's kind of.
And then if they lasted a year, they got a daughter. So.
You get your one of our daughters. It's like a Jacob thing. Yeah, that's funny. But yeah.
Quick question. I just another little weird one before we circle back. But remember how we've always talked about the wives and moms being our teachers? Were you a teacher? I can't remember. Did you ever teach? Did you ever get asked to teach, or was that weird then? Or I can't remember. Yeah, I think. Didn't you teach Courtney actually? Yeah, Courtney's gonna yell at me. I'm pretty sure she did.
It depends on what grade she started in, because mainly I was in K4. Sometimes K5.
Yeah, she was little.
Maybe
it was Katie then. Yeah.
K4.
Okay.
Yeah, and that was an issue too, because you can't be a teacher, but you can be a helper. Helper. Yeah,
you couldn't be a teacher.
I mean,
they told you could be
teacher. Yeah. So
okay.
Yeah. So, but eventually, I did ended up. I had a class for like maybe 2 years, by myself, and I loved it. I love being with the kids. I love loving on them and teaching them and showing them the unconditional love, and it was a beautiful thing. But again, sometimes I feel like I sound negative, but being in that environment, I just felt like something needed to come off of me, to get off of me, if that makes sense.
Mom, how could you not sound negative after what we went through?
I'm sorry.
I'm saying. I do all the time. There's a lot of negative stuff to say. I don't know. There's no apology.
And I've never really shared that with you guys, or never, I've so wanted to share with you guys so many times, and it kind of, let you know what my journey is, what my thoughts are, and maybe that's why Mom acts the way she acts sometimes, or I don't know. But this is a good thing, and I appreciate it.